Gustavo over there. Is that okay? And then I'll start here so we're together, and then I'll shift when she comes. Okay. So
am I okay?
Great.
Take it off? Should we start?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session today. My name is Stenka Piskulic, and I'm the Managing Director of Enduring Earth, which is a new global collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund, Pew Charitable Trusts, and private investors and philanthropists Ben and Luciana Walton. And what we seek to do through Enduring Earth is to deploy new project finance for permanence mechanisms at a global scale to allow for sustainable finance and greater conservation and to accelerate conservation around the world. Today, as we're gathered here in this meeting, the question that is flowing around all of the pavilions and all of the meetings is, nature has a central role to play in helping the world achieve its climate goals. But really, it's what is the best approach to quickly deliver results at scale? And that is what we are here to talk about, because that is specifically what project finance for permanence can help achieve. How can we not only meet these goals, but sustain them over time, and do so by working in collaboration between communities, governments, all the stakeholders, civil society, to jointly achieve joint vision for conservation and to sustain it over time. So PFPs, PFP is the short version of what we call Project Finance for Permanence. What they do is they bring together partners across sectors, and they help secure the financial, political, and the community support required to keep both landscapes and seascapes intact. That means that they are built in the fundamental importance of engaging local peoples, governments, civil society, and others who have the most at stake in securing these landscapes and seascapes, starting with the communities on the ground that are also part of this process. And what is beautiful about this approach is that it has the capacity to simultaneously address the three crises: the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and also the economic crisis, by providing long-term financing and support and offering governments the opportunity to actually seek new financial tools and deploy new financial mechanisms to ensure this sustainability. So it looks at sustainable approaches to both development and natural resource use that is kept in carbon, in forests, seas, grasslands, soil, and in biodiversity. So we're very excited about the potential of these approaches. These approaches have already been done in 5 countries in the past. They have been done in Great Bear, they have been done in the Amazon, in Brazil, in Peru, and in Bhutan as well, and in my home country of Costa Rica. And now here's the opportunity for us through Enduring Earth to actually extend this effort to 20 more geographies around the world by the year 2030. So therefore contributing not only to meet the 30 by 30 goals for many of these places, but also to sustain them over time. And so we're very excited about this. We're very excited about the big results that this can provide. And so I'm very honored to be joined here today by such a distinguished group of panelists to talk about how we can rapidly accelerate PFP model to achieve Enduring Earth's vision of building these 20 PFPs and securing over 500 million hectares of land and water and improving the lives of millions of people around the world. So please join me in welcoming today's guests. His Excellency John Antonio Briceño, Prime Minister of Belize, the Honorable Andrea Mesa, who will be joining us in a few minutes, who is the the Costa Rican Minister of Environment and Energy, Gustavo Fonseca, who's Director of Programs at the GEF, Jennifer Morris, who's CEO of the Nature Conservancy, and Carter Roberts, who's President and CEO of World Wildlife Fund. Thank you for being with us today. And I now leave you with Carter, who is actually one of the leading experts in PFPs around the world, and will now moderate this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stenka. This is a wonderful moment, an exciting moment, something we've talked about for many, many years. It's wonderful to be here with our panelists who do know a lot about this topic. And this is all about listening to each of their perspectives. I'm going to pepper each of them with questions, and we're going to move through this quickly, and then we're going to have a special little surprise for you at the end. But I want to start off with Prime Minister Briceño, who is no stranger to this work. He previously served as the Deputy Prime Minister. He served as the Minister for Natural Resources in Belize, oversaw the creation of a whole new National Protected Areas Act and the declaration of all kinds of new protected areas, as we were just discovering as we were comparing notes for those of us who have worked in Central America for a long time. So he is no stranger to this. And Belize right now has the opportunity to be the very first nation on earth to create a fully marine and coastal PFP, the first time ever, and to realize and build on all the accomplishments that Belize has already had, but then to reach 30 by 30 and to make it near permanent through a long-term sustainable financing mechanism. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to start with you, and I just have a few questions. And the first one is, you are determined to put Belize on the map in the area of sustainable development and the protection of nature, and to do what I just described, to be the world's first coastal and marine PFP. What message do you hope this sends to the other nations here gathered in Glasgow?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Carter, for your kind words. And as I was speaking with you and Dari, Denka? Zeka. It's a difficult name to remember. Sorry. We need to find an easier name for you. It makes me go back that I've been doing this for quite a long time. And certainly it's a part of the work that I enjoy most, to doing this kind of work. Belize has been at the map when it comes to the issue of conservation. As it is, we have more than 30% of our land already in some form of protection. And with this agreement, we expect by 2026 we'll be having 30% of our oceans under some sort of protection. But what is important with what we're doing today is that this gives us now the opportunity not only to have what you call paper reserves, but the PFP gives an opportunity to countries, especially small countries like ours that have difficulty in accessing funding, to be able to ensure that we can have funding in permanence, as what PFP stands for. And for us in Belize, we are very excited about it. When I met with the private sector, with the labor and the opposition and our NGO community, and we explained as to what we're doing and what this agreement that we want to work with both of you, everybody was very excited about that opportunity. So I want to encourage other countries to look at what we are doing now and what some of the other countries like Costa Rica has been doing, and Brazil and Bhutan, and to see this opportunity of finding the funds to be able to have your reserves not only on paper, but also to really protect them for future generations.
Great. So you are pursuing truly innovative financial mechanisms to get a head start on this. And one thing I've learned is every country is different. Every country gets after this in a different way. But you have started off with some very interesting financial mechanisms to bring together your whole of government and to restore your legendary barrier reef and the associated marine systems. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you see those financial mechanisms coming together around a PFP?
Well, Carter, what's very exciting and interesting with what we're doing today, or what we've been doing for the past few months, is that many small countries have borrowed too much. And COVID-19 has made it even more difficult. So in effect, like in our case, Belize's national debt is about 135% of GDP. And here's one instance where we have a private debt of about 560 million US dollars owned by private individuals that we managed to sit down with them and to negotiate to pay them off. We're paying them off at a substantial discount. And by doing that, we are having, I believe it's one of the first that we've got, probably, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong here, where a country is negotiating debt forgiveness, but also getting funding for conservation. Because by paying off these private bondholders, and it was no easy negotiations that we had with them, but they saw what we were attempting to do. So they cooperated with us because they knew but what they're doing, they're helping a country, in our case, to forgive a portion of our debt. It's going to be almost about 12% of GDP. But at the same time that we are going to have funds to be able to set up a PFP, a permanent financial, a project financial permanence, to be able to protect a World Heritage Site, which is the Belize Barrier Reef, one of the wonders of the world.
So you just updated your NDC with aggressive targets on mangroves, the restoration of associated marine systems. How do you see this PFP helping you accomplish your climate goals that you set out? And that is basically the ticket of entry to this COP, is to set ambitious goals that reflect the urgency that we face in the world.
As a country, we do not we are not the causes of climate change. We're doing our part. I mean, because over 60% of our country is still under some form of forest cover. But that aside, we still believe that all of us are in this together. All of us are in the same boat. It's not that Belize can protect itself and the rest of the world, we don't have to worry about them. So we believe that we also have to do more. But by the actions that Belize is taking, by setting aside 30% of our oceans in protected areas, more than 30% of our national land, we are challenging the developed countries that it is time for them to stop the talking. We've been talking, I've been going to many of COP meetings since the early 2000s, and it's only different faces, but the same thing we're talking over and over. And for so long, people are saying that, oh, climate change is a myth. Well, it's not a myth. Now everybody's realizing it, even the developed countries. Like Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned yesterday in his message that Canada, one of their towns was burned to the ground because of climate change. In the United States, you have areas where there's drought, that their forests are being burned, and they have no control over it. And we, small countries like Belize, that has a coast, whenever as the climate gets, as the world gets warmer, more and more of our land is disappearing. Actually, one of the persons that's here with me, and I wish you can see it, Carter and Jen and everybody else, where we had an island that was used by birds, and it has disappeared. I mean, they had the video showing it to you, and that is how climate change affects you directly. We have droughts in Belize. The climate patterns have changed. When we're supposed to be dry, it's raining. When it's raining, it's back and forth. Last year, we had historic flooding. We haven't seen floods in about 100 years. So we want to do more, but it is time for the developed countries to do their part.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to turn to our next panelists, and before I do so, I want to just say, of all the PFPs that have been done in the world, there are two institutions that have been a part of almost every one of them. And that is the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and Eileen Lee, who is the head of their environment program, is somewhere here today. There's Eileen. And the other is the Global Environmental Facility, which was, I think as everyone knows, created back in the original COP in Rio as the response of the world to creating a financial mechanism to help developing countries address sustainability, the protection of nature, and climate change. So Gustavo is a native of Brazil. He's had a long and storied career in conservation. And the parts that I remember is he spent a long time at Conservation International and has led the program area for the GEF for as long as I can remember. And he's worked for a number of heads of GEF, and he has been a constant. And he has been right in the middle of most of these PFPs and is a great source of insight and wisdom on how they work, why are they important, and what are some of the challenges that they face. So Gustavo, welcome. And I just wanted to say, okay, you have been a part of 5 of these. And what is your perspective on the impact of doing these and how they have played out over time? Because we're talking about durability, not just one fell swoop announcement and then walk away.
Thank you. Is this working? Thanks for recognizing the long-standing interest of the GEF in this arena and protected areas, and in making sure that we protect nature and we have the systems in place to really endure the first investments that we make in creating these areas into the future. And as Carter mentioned, ever since the GEF was created, this agenda of protected areas has been at the core of what we do. It's been one of the mainstays of the GEF. We did an analysis a few years ago, and in developing countries, which is the only geography that we operate, because we are a financial mechanism of 5 different conventions, this being one, biodiversity being another. We have had investments in close to 15% of all protected areas in developing countries. So the footprint of the GEF in this arena is basically everywhere. And it's not anything that the GEF can claim credit for, about, but it's more about how we can assist countries in realizing this vision that nature is part of their natural capital, it's part of the way that they make decisions, and it's part of their future, and it's part of their societies. But protected areas are, in a lot of ways, a social contract. They start normally through opportunity and political will, but as we know, political will comes and goes, and we need to have in place instruments that can go beyond governments and can really attend to the country needs over time. So what did we do early on in the GEF when we worked on the creation of protected areas? We started investing in conservation trust funds. I think we've invested in close to 60 or 70, I lost the count now, in several countries. And the idea there was let's create an endowment, let's put some money here, and this money is going to generate some revenues. These revenues can be in turn turned over to protected areas for long-term maintenance. And what we learned from that process is that endowments are good in certain cases, but they tend to lock up capital that sometimes are needed on an urgent basis, and they don't have really a long-term perspective. Endowments are, for the most part, built to last forever. And we learned that that's not the best way to go. Or, I wouldn't say that all of them are in this way, but there is something about endowments that do not really address the need, particularly as you go up your ambition and you try to protect as many hectares as possible. So we start looking into what systems we could put in place and what innovation we could bring in finance. And I think the first one that really realized this vision from beginning to now, implementation for several years, is the project that WWF actually jump-started by building on the political momentum that it came across back when President Fernando Henrique Cardoso was in power. And he made a commitment to protect 70 million hectares of the Amazon forest in Brazil. So, of course, Jeff joined into that effort, and that patrimony is there. I mean, the program it's called ARPA, the Protected Areas of the Amazon, has been there since then. It is expanding, and it's great. But again, we faced the same thing. There was a piece of that puzzle that was to be addressed on an endowment. The endowment faced the same hard wall. So what did we do? We transformed that endowment in what we call a transition fund. What is this transition fund? We managed to get more donors involved, more financing involved, including from private contributors. And we created this long horizon in which this fund is a sinking fund that will last for 25 or 30 years. And it's supposed to gradually substitute the financing of protected areas, maintenance of protected areas, from the fund to the government budget. So it's not a traumatic thing that you have to make a political decision, but over time, and particularly if these countries are indeed true in their commitments to protect natural capital and to build on natural capital, to have a different model of development, we believe that over time this transition is going to be made. And so this has been quite an interesting model, and it doesn't lock in a huge amount of money, but it's very effective, and we are managing to support these protected areas even through periods of hardship. And what we learned is that during periods of hardship, it's doubly important that you have that lifeline that's going from a sustainable financial instrument down to the protected areas and feeds their needs in terms of management, because things can go wrong pretty easily. And protected areas, they should be here for the long haul. So, Carter, going back to your question, and after that, we were involved in other models. The 5 that you mentioned, 4 that Jeff is involved, the 5th because it's not a developing country, otherwise we would have been. But it's great that this is happening. So we joined with this initiative with Enduring Earth. We are now undergoing the replenishment of the Jeff Trust Fund. We get financing every 4 years, and well built into the strategy is this agenda of 30 by 30, and within it a really big commitment to maintaining these protected areas over the long haul. So, Carter, going back to you, we are in this with you, and we are learning as we go along, and thanks for really being ahead of the game and bringing us along.
Great. Thank you, Gustavo. And we ought to give it up for the Jeff, because they have been a huge part of some of the biggest accomplishments in the world of protected areas and nature. Okay, I wanted to, it's not just a member of the audience that came up and sat down next to me. It's Minister Meza of Costa Rica, and I just wanted to introduce her to the crowd. She was with us in New York recently at the most amazing gathering of actors and players in this world. She is an expert in sustainable development, more than 20 years of experience in formulating public policies, executing projects, has worked in more than 15 Latin American countries in multidisciplinary projects financed by all kinds of institutions. In 2019, Costa Rica became one of the first countries to craft a national decarbonization plan led by Minister Meza, which aims to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So this has been held up as a model for the region and the world, and prompted the United Nations to grant Costa Rica the Champions of the Earth Award. So, Minister Meza, thank you for joining us. You have a lot of experience. Your fellow citizen of Costa Rica, Zdenka Piskulic, is here with us today. But I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is, Costa Rica has always been seen as an innovation lab where new things happen, new things are invented. I remember when I worked there, and when I interviewed candidates for Zdenka's position back in the day when I worked for the Nature Conservancy, everyone who applied had a PhD from different parts of the world. And it is just, it's a hotbed of innovation. And I just want to ask you about Forever Costa Rica, which was one of the PFPs, and how it's helped with your national ambitions.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Carters, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be among friends. Thank you all, and thank you for the invitation. When we are doing this long-term plan, and basically the decarbonization plan is our long-term strategy to become a carbon neutral economy in 2050, we also need to understand what will be the financial architecture to also support a lot of the projects and the policies that we have there in the plan. And basically, Costa Rica por Siempre and PFPs is one of these mechanisms that we have to really guarantee that we will be doing a lot of the implementation. And in the case of the decarbonization plan, we also included nature-based solutions, of course, as part of the strategy to become a carbon neutral economy. So right now, what we are seeing is that we can not only state and protect the part of the land conservation, that we need to move into the ocean. And we also just heard the announcement made by the 4 presidents of Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and Costa Rica, announcing that they will be protecting the Eastern Tropical Pacific. And this also now generates this new opportunity. How are we going to be then doing the management of this area, but also supporting the 4 countries? I mean, we have the political will. We have seen this in the declaration. And now it's also time to think, can we, now that we have the lessons learned of PFPs, also use them in the ocean part? And I think that this is, I mean, when you know how to do a good thing, when you know the recipe, I think it's good then to follow the recipe.
As someone who is a terrible cook, I always follow the recipe, but and it's true, once you have done one of these, you want to do more of these, and the more Prime Minister Briceño and I were talking about the importance of visiting Costa Rica, learning from what you have done, and really continuing to evolve the approach that we've taken. Your approach to this, and you've already framed it, it's not just about nature, it's also about climate change. Nature is an intrinsic part of your approach to climate change. Can you just say a little bit more about nature-based solutions, how they work, why they're important to Costa Rica? I mean, I come from the United States where the whole game is in renewable energy and transportation. But for most of the developing world, it's about, a lot of it is about nature. So could you comment a bit about that?
For us, a lot of, one part of the big challenge when we are talking about climate change in nature is to avoid deforestation, right? To stop land use change. And yes, there is where protected areas or strategies to work with the farmers or with mechanisms such as payment of environmental services makes a lot of sense. It's about going to zero deforestation, which is also something that we need if we want to achieve the 1.5 goal. And if we want to achieve that goal, it's also about landscape management at the end. And when we are doing these and to do this landscape management, then it's critical also to work with agriculture. And it's about production and conservation and do this management and combining. And in the, I'm seeing again the decarbonization plan, we see this as an opportunity to enhance our agriculture sector because it's about going into making these efforts of efficiency. It's about that. So we're talking about precision agriculture, which is like the next step. So it's about, if we do this combination right now of precision agriculture, protecting the landscape, having conservation areas, intact areas also, and working along in the corridors This is how we see that it is critical, and we are analyzing, in the case of Costa Rica, yes, the urban part, the transport part, but it's also about managing the rural landscape. Otherwise, we will not be achieving these goals, and also including now the ocean as well, which is the new frontier.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to, just for those of you who, I'm going to provide a little advertisement, which is Enduring Earth, as Dinka said, is a collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, WWF, Pew Charitable Trust, and the Walton family, along with partners like the GEF and the Moore Foundation, to be a resource to countries who want to emulate what Belize, Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil have done. And so if there's interest in any country that is here tonight or is watching, we want you to reach out to us, because we are very interested in expanding this model, as you said, expanding this recipe, knowing that every country does something different that is cool and essential to making it work. I wanted to turn to the final panelist, which is my good friend and colleague, Jen Morris, who is one of the founding partners of Enduring Earth. Jen, in addition, she and I both grew up in Georgia. She spent a significant amount of time in Africa early on in her career. She spent 20 plus years at Conservation International, rising up within the organization, and just recently was named the new president and CEO of the Nature Conservancy, which is a magnificent organization, different from WWF, and it is one of the most fun things I've ever done in my career, is to work with Jen and TNC and all these colleagues and partners to do this work. So I want to turn it over to Jen to just comment on a couple of things. The Nature Conservancy did the Great Bear Rainforest PFP and Forever Costa Rica PFP. And you've learned a lot from these. But I just want to say one thing that TNC does brilliantly, one of many, is the financial deals and transactions and finding innovative ways to bring capital to bear in securing landscapes around the world. Can you just comment on how you see TNC's experience, your perspective on how that works?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here among friends. So at the Nature Conservancy, as Carter mentioned, and first of all, I just want to say that I'm not sure many of you realize what a big deal it is that you have not just 2, but 3 of the biggest environmental NGOs actually working together. We are collaborating, we're sharing donor lists, we're sharing donors, we're talking every day. It's actually really transformational for our sector because, I'm sure as Carter can appreciate, our organizations often compete. And so the fact that we've said, look, we don't have time for that competition. We have got to sit down together as a community and work together. It's really game changing. So I just want to make that point and thank Carter for an incredible partnership. So in terms of TNC and our financial transactions, so we want to help countries solve 2 big problems. One is, in the case as Prime Minister Briceño was mentioning, their debt crisis. Is my mic off? No, it's not. Okay. And obviously with COVID, especially a country that's so reliant on tourism, like Belize or like Costa Rica and many others. I was just in Kenya, saw exactly the same thing, where we as conservationists have thought for so long, well, ecotourism is the best. It's amazing. You're preserving nature. You get people to come and be educated about nature. It's great until you have a global pandemic. And then it's not a great choice for your economic model if that's all you have. So what we're seeing and trying to help in Belize and other countries is a model where we can, as Prime Minister Briceño said, take some of that debt burden and transition it into a conservation win. And so we've been working very hard with many partners for the last 3 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 18 months or so. And there will be a very big announcement on Friday about this, but just to say this is the second of what we're calling the blue bonds transactions. The first was 5 years ago in the Seychelles, where the Nature Conservancy and partners worked very closely with the government of the Seychelles to create a marine protected area that is twice the size of the UK. Huge area, 30% of that country's exclusive economic zone, and in exchange, they were able to reduce their debt burden. Really great outcome. We're looking to do this in many other places, and as you can imagine, given the highly indebted nature of so many countries right now, especially that we're reliant on tourism and that have an amazing biodiversity and have committed through the High Ambition Coalition to a 30 by 30 agenda, they're looking around and saying, we want to do this, but how do we pay for it? So our job in the donor community and the NGO community is to be there to provide the support that we can for them to achieve their goals, because it is amazing. All of these proclamations that were made today, the billions of dollars, but at the end of the day, if his government doesn't have the budget or her government doesn't have the budget or the communities on the ground don't have the incentives and the money that they need to conserve, it's all platitudes. So that is our goal, is to really make sure that you all have the resources that you need. So whether it's a debt swap and a PFP, which in many countries we're seeing the need for both, because one transaction alone will not fully fund the conservation that's needed forever, as Gustavo rightly said. So how do we bring all these incredible opportunities together and help and support governments and the 30 by 30 ambitions? So that's some of what we're doing.
Great, thank you, Jen. And it is true, while the big announcements are being made this week, we are in active discussions with a number of countries on executing. And I always say life is about execution. It's not enough to make an announcement, you have to actually deliver the goods. And that is what is so great about being here on stage with two governments that have worked very hard to deliver the goods. And I want to pivot to the little surprise that I had for you, which is we are going to have here live on stage a formal signing ceremony with the Nature Conservancy, with WWF, and with the government of Belize to formally inaugurate and formalize our partnership to design and deliver a PFP in that really important country. So I'm going to, I think, Jen, you, the Prime Minister, and I are going to, we're going to sign this. We are going to have Gustavo and the Minister as witnesses. And so I believe that we have a document that we're going to sign. It's on the table, but let me say a word. This MOU just represents our commitment to work with each other to make this happen, and to make it happen quickly. And it acknowledges the need to fill the financial gap in Belize that the Prime Minister talked about, and Jen just gave voice to as a general issue. And in signing this, the government of Belize, the Nature Conservancy, and WWF agree to work together. Here's the, in quote, good faith, and expeditiously collaborate to design and develop a PFP for Belize by the year 2025. So, Mr. Prime Minister, would you like to say a few words before we do this?
Little did I know, a year ago when we got elected, we'll be working on something like this. But it's certainly quite exciting, as I mentioned earlier, that by signing this MOU with two of probably the largest NGOs in conservation, in the world of conservation, it certainly will help us to be able to ensure that we keep up to our commitments. You know, in many instances, individuals and companies and governments, I did not want to start with governments, sign on to agreements or agree to do certain things and they don't. But through this MOU, it will help to guide us and to steer us to ensure that we can live to the commitments, because the MOU is also tied to the announcement. on the setting up of the this PFP that will be used to finance a lot of the conservation, the marine conservation work that we are doing and need to continue to do in Belize. So certainly for me as the Prime Minister, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to sign on behalf of the people of Belize.
Great. So, Prime Minister, the pin is up there. A familiar flag is on the table. And you go first and we will follow.
We are the witness here of this marriage. Congratulations. And you know, in 6 months you're going to have another natural resources for the job. You may choose to invest in this. We'll be very supportive.
There you go. Fantastic.
Well, it is now my turn to close this meeting. And as I reflect on what we're seeing today, I reflect on when it was Forever Costa Rica, when I was part of the planning team for Forever Costa Rica over a decade ago. And we were just beginning to think about what PFPs were about. And we had no idea what it would be like once it was implemented. And now to look back 10 years and see how much we have achieved in creating other PFPs around the world and engaging others and bringing in other willing governments to see the government of Belize, which is a neighbor, a friend of ours, here now at the table, willing also to move forward with the PFP. And to think that in 10 years we created 5, and in the next 10 years we'll create 20, will require a lot of work, a lot of ambition, but also a lot of passion. And that is only possible through partnerships between public sector, private sector, governments, civil society, all stakeholders working together. This is the evolution of conservation. Conservation that focuses on 5 major aspects: Organizational, creating strong conservation trust funds, organizations that can follow this in the future. Political, supporting governments and building their enabling conditions to be able to actually do the conservation that needs to be done. Social, bringing in the groups that need to be part of this process, engaging communities and all throughout this process, and bringing in new economic opportunities. Financial, providing sustainable finance for all of the goals that we need to meet. And finally, which one am I missing? Oh, environmental, of course, and ecological, and making sure that we are building better, stronger, not only protected areas, but better and stronger places both for climate and for nature, both marine and terrestrial. And so thank you to those of you who are still implementing. Thank you to Costa Rica for being a leader in this process. Thank you to Belize for believing in the work that we're doing. And thank you to this wonderful partnership of organizations, as Jen said, that are completely breaking all barriers to work together towards conservation. To the GEF, to the Moore Foundation, for your support throughout the years in making this happen. And we hope that when we see you here 2 years from now in the next COP, and when we see you in the Biodiversity COP, that we will be able to celebrate many of these achievements throughout the world. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll be in touch soon.